What's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. In case this is one of your first times listening to the show, what we do is take you behind the scenes of the top MBA programs in the world. We want to give you a good idea of what the culture is like at these programs and how you can give yourself the best chance of getting in to them. This week, I brought on Gregory Wool, who is a first-year MBA at the Cornell Johnson MBA program. Gregory overcame a relatively low GMAT to not only get into Cornell, but win a full tuition scholarship. So we talk about his application strategy, and he gives his best application tips. And because Gregory also just finished his first semester at Cornell Johnson, we talk about what that experience was like managing academics, managing FOMO, managing recruiting, and managing student club activities. And those of you interested in Cornell will get just a really good idea, a really clear picture of what it's like. It sounds amazing. So yeah, I hope you get a lot of value from this episode. Just a quick note, remember that you can get free school selection help as well as some expert tips on how you can improve your profile based on your targets at touchmba.com. This is what Greg did about 18 months ago with us. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Gregory Wool. All right, so my next guest has a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Dramatic Performance. He's a former bartender, restaurant manager, hotel operations director, and aspiring strategy consultant. He's already won first place twice, by the way, in 2 case competitions. And,
actually, it's 3 times now.
Hey, 3 times. Excuse me. And he's an MBA candidate at the Cornell Johnson School. It's my pleasure to introduce Gregory Wool. Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darren. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I mean, before our call, of course, I was tracing our email history, and it goes all the way back to fall of last year, and it's been amazing to see you progress. You know, you actually requested an episode on careers in HR.
Yeah, I was working as a director of operations, as you mentioned, for a luxury independent hotel in Connecticut. And I'd worked with some really powerful HR partners, and I was really I really enjoyed the idea that HR was one of the most powerful levers within an organization to affect change. And in looking at the work that I was doing, I wanted to be able to sort of pull those levers and be able to have that bird's eye view of an organization and find the ways to motivate folks and put people in positions to succeed. And so that was one of the driving forces behind me starting this MBA journey.
Yeah. I mean, you're such a unique candidate. You have a really distinct profile. Even though, you know, we've seen thousands of profiles at Touch MBA, but like yours really stood out. And so I'm so thankful that you reached out to me and we kept in touch. But I thought what we could do is first go through kind of what you did in your application. You could share your journey and hopefully some tips for our audience there. And then because you just finished all your final exams from your first semester, I would love to talk to you more about whoa, like what's the real experience like on the ground, right? It's one thing to apply and you know, we'll get into the wonderful scholarship you won and how you did that, but it's another thing to go through the whole process. And I'm sure you're doing a lot of recruiting activities as well. And so it's fascinating for me to look at how your goals have changed, how your perspective on the MBA has changed. And I hope that comes through in this conversation as well. But
excellent. That sounds great.
Yeah. Let's first start with your application strategy. So we're calling this episode Quantless in Cornell, even though you seem to be doing fine on the consulting front. But yeah, so why don't we first talk about your GMAT score?
Sure. Yeah. So I took the GMAT one time. I prepared for it. All right. So why don't I start by saying how I sort of approached the whole MBA process, because it all sort of ties together.
Yes.
I was working as a director of operations, and I realized I was building a really strong career for myself if I wanted to be a general manager of a hotel in the long term. And that would have been a great career, but I realized that I sort of wanted the impact of my efforts and my work to have sort of a wider set of results, right? And I didn't know quite how to do that given my unique background, my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, my career in hotels. How was I going to go to a hiring manager in another industry and convey to them that I had transferable skills that would allow me to be successful in their organization? And I had a conversation with my uncle who got his MBA in the 90s. And I said, I'm 30. This is what my resume looks like. How do I make the next step? Is it too late for me to say, go back to school? And he said, no, go get your MBA. When I got mine, I thought I was getting it for the letters. And what I got was an education and a network that served me through the rest of my career. And he told me to start studying that day for the GMAT, because with my background, every point was going to count. And he told me to get into the best school that I could get into that would give me the best opportunity to move forward. And so I signed up for the GMAT that night. That was in September of last year.
Yeah,
and I took
late.
the GMAT on December 3rd, just the one time. And so between September and December, all of my free time was spent teaching myself math, because I had not taken a math course where I sat down and somebody put numbers on the board since junior year of high school. And I took GMAT Prep Now. I worked through the entire course. I took every practice GMAT there was. I figured out the questions that were easy for me so I could stop paying attention to those and focus on the areas of weakness. And in my practice tests leading up to test day, I was scoring 47, 48, 46 on the quant on the practice tests. And then I sat down for the actual test on the day, and I did the verbal first, which always came pretty easy to me. And then I did the quant, and I felt like I was drowning. I felt like everything was falling apart, and I was going to have to retake the test and delay my plans by a year. And then you don't get your score until you've taken the integrated reasoning and written the essay. So the whole time I'm writing the essay, I'm just thinking, oh no, what's the score going to be? What's the score going to be? And that's the only thing in my head as I'm writing an essay. And I hit submit, and the first number that pops up is that aggregate score, 740.
Amazing. You're
I couldn't believe
thrilled.
it.
Yeah.
Right. I was thrilled. And the breakdown was 42 quant, vastly underperforming based on what I had been practicing, and a 51 on the verbal. I think I got every single question right on the verbal. And I didn't know quite how to take it. I didn't know if I should retake the test or if it was going to show the wrong thing.
Let me point out that a 51 on the verbal, I did a quick lookup. That's 99 percentile. So yeah, you probably didn't, get any questions wrong. And then on the 42 quant falls somewhere between the 40 and 50th percentile. So,
yeah. I think it's the only score where the percentile is higher than the score. I think it's a 40 or 43rd percentile on a 42 score or something like that.
Yeah, crazy. So sorry, continue on.
Yeah. So I knew that given that I had a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and had no quant on my undergrad transcript, and that my career was heavy on the personnel management side and light on the quantitative analysis side, I had to do something to demonstrate to the schools that I wasn't going to drown in their curriculum. So listening to your show, I think you and several other guests recommended mbamath.com. And that was a resource that I utilized. I paid for the program. I took the course, and I took each test until I could get 100% on it, so that in the supplemental applications, I could turn in the transcript for mbamath.com, include in the optional essay an explanation of the efforts that I'd made in the GMAT, the skills that I demonstrated in mbamath.com, and also the Coursera courses that I'd signed up for during the summer leading up to school, to demonstrate not only that I was aware of a perceived weakness in quantitative ability, but that I was taking steps to address it, and that based on the scores from mbamath.com, that I was at least going to be able to cope in coursework.
Amazing. I mean, that's in a nutshell. I love that, because you were self-aware of your situation and you took all the steps and clearly put in a ton of effort to get to that next level and demonstrate your competence, send a very strong signal to Cornell and maybe some of your other schools. How did they respond to that? I'm curious. Did you hear back from them at all, or was it just like you got in?
So from the schools?
Yeah.
So I think I did pretty well in getting interviews and sort of with my acting performance and a lot of my career is spent in rooms talking to people. So the interview side of things was not, I think, as daunting for me as it is for some other candidates. So my whole mentality with the application process was, let me get in front of somebody. And Cornell was actually the only school that asked me about my quant in the interview.
Interesting.
And it was, I interviewed at what they call a leadership excellence and assessment day. Leadership and Excellence Assessment Day, LEAD event. They have one for each quarter. And so my interview was actually done by someone in the Career Center rather than by someone at the admissions office. And so she had what looked like a printout of a review of someone had done of my application with some key points that they had wanted to highlight. And she said, "So, Greg, I read somewhere that you had a low quant. Would you like to talk about that?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I spent a lot of effort studying for the GMAT, and frankly, I sort of underperformed, I think, on test day based on my capabilities leading up to it. But I finished MBAmath.com, getting 100% on each of the tests, and I'm currently enrolled in microeconomics, statistics, and finance courses on Coursera, which I'm very much enjoying. And in my professional life, I've been able to do return on investment analyses and make judgments based on labor cost forecasts on how to proceed. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to in my MBA is being able to gain a wider set of hard skills that I can use to make better decisions using quantitative analysis in the future. And so all of that was obviously true and demonstrated again that awareness, but also that I wasn't afraid of numbers, but just that the way that my career path had gone, I had not had the exposure that some of my colleagues who did audit for Big Four firms would have.
I mean, you just kind of gave a great template for an interview answer for that. So I'm sure a lot of listeners who didn't do so well on their quant, on their GMAT now have a path forward there, or at least a model. So, yeah. Well, let's talk about the LEAD event, because I think that's kind of an interesting part of the Cornell MBA application, right? Could you tell us more about like what happens during that LEAD event? Because I know you had to attend that, right, to be considered for the Roy H. Park Leadership Fellowship as well.
Yep, exactly. So it's an admissions event. It's I don't know exactly what the criteria are or how they select the group, but there were about 25 people the round I was there. I submitted right around New Year's. I think that's Cornell's round 3 because they have a very early round of admissions. So there were about 25 of us who came on campus and spent the first evening sort of networking, meeting each other, getting tours of the school, getting to meet with some current students. And then there were several luncheons where we got to sit in panels with current students and ask questions. And there were discussions of various careers and opportunities to meet with the leadership faculty and the career faculty. And I believe the associate dean as well. And then the final day was a full assessment where we were broken down into small teams and given the opportunity to complete group exercises where we would do an exercise and then discuss our perception of leadership and then do another exercise and then see what we'd learn over the course of the day. And it was a really great opportunity to collaborate and meet some of the other folks who were applying to MBA programs, because so much of this process happens in a vacuum where you're sitting by yourself, trying to study, trying to learn as much as you can about schools. And in my case, no one else who worked at my hotel had pursued an MBA. So there's this sort of loneliness surrounding the process of this question of if you're doing it right and if you're not, if the goal that you think you have in mind is not what you are actually working towards. And so working with these small teams on the LEAD event was the first of many experiences at Cornell where I got to see the high level of motivation that my colleagues would have, and also the opportunity to develop leadership skills and how important that is to the community at Cornell. There was no sort of negative competition. Obviously, everyone was there to compete for an admission spot and potentially a scholarship, but that didn't come through in the way that everyone was working together, and that was really refreshing from my point of view. There was additionally a case where we were broken down into even smaller groups of 4 or 5 to discuss a business case that was given to us, and then we had to make the case in front of the rest of the group. And there was additionally a discussion of leadership, an active sort of brainstorm about what leadership qualities we thought were important. And throughout all of this, there's students and faculty sort of taking notes on clipboards, and you don't know what they're discussing, and you very much feel on for a few days, but it's invigorating at the same time. And then they let you go around 5 o'clock on the last day, and several of us just went out to dinner to sort of decompress and clear our heads. And of course, the director of admissions happened to be at the restaurant that we were at that night.
Like, whoa, all right, I'm going to hide these drinks that I just ordered. So was there any like one-on-one interviews? Sorry, maybe I missed that.
Yeah, so at one point during the second day, we were broken off for one-on-one interviews. Mine, I mentioned, was with somebody in the career office, the Career Development Center, and some folks had interviewed with people from the admissions department, and some had interviews with trained current students.
I mean, it sounds like a really intense experience. I mean, I can't. Maybe if you're in the flow of it, you feel okay and you're just being yourself. But you know, I think getting past that, the idea of like students and admissions officers taking notes on their clipboards can be a bit intimidating. Maybe as an actor, you've acted a lot, right? You mentioned?
Yeah. So that was my background. The first 4 years of my post-undergrad career were in New York City, both bartending and acting and auditioning.
Okay. For stage or film? Or?
Yeah. Stage, focusing on Shakespeare. I liked Shakespeare, Chekhov, Tennessee Williams, all the classics. And I got to do some fun work in New York.
So all that came back to serve you during the admissions process.
You know, it's one of the most interesting things in the MBA experience so far is the way that everyone's unique background, their diversity of experience and culture and skill set has a really incredible ability to help out the rest of the group and the rest of the team. For example, I think vastly undervalued my management experience and the fact that I'd had a team of 8 directs that reported to me. That's something that many of my classmates have not had the opportunity to, whereas they can help me with some of the more technical analysis that I just hadn't had exposure to prior to coming into school. And so working together, we've been able to help build each other in that way. And from a performance standpoint, I sort of mentioned interviews aren't as daunting for me as perhaps for some other people. And from a case competition standpoint, it's certainly been helpful to work with my team to maybe pass along some of the training and some of the tools that I have in that regard. And as you mentioned, it's been successful in a couple of competitions so far.
Yeah, I can't wait. I actually want to come back to that in a little bit about how having all your experience, how that has affected your experience. I mean, God, that sounded funny. How having more than the average amount of work experience has affected your Cornell MBA. But I want to stick with like when you were applying. What were your career goals at the time? Yeah.
So I had somebody run through an exercise with me where you're meant to close your eyes and picture for yourself the life that you want to have. Basically, from the moment that you wake up, what type of clothes are you putting on? How are you getting to work? Is it on a subway? Are you driving? Are you walking? What sort of office do you want to be in? And really what I realized and sort of what I mentioned earlier was I wanted to have a position where I was working with really sharp, intelligent people who were motivating me and helping me to continue learning at all times, and where within the organization that I worked, that I was able to drive a large amount of impact, and that the results of that work would extend beyond that organization onto the world at large. And to that end, based on my experience, what I really saw as a powerful lever for doing that was organizational design and human capital strategy. And I tailored my search for schools and my application essay very much to those goals because I wanted that opportunity to be at a high level in an organization thinking strategically. And throughout the process, that was very much my focus. And I was happy to get into school and be able to chat with some current students and some practitioners and some alumni. And I realized that actually a big moment for me was the consulting symposium that Johnson hosted at their New York City campus on Roosevelt Island at Cornell Tech. And it was a full day event before school started this summer, where current students and alumni who were in the world of consulting, who had graduated from Cornell, were able to speak about their careers in consulting, their exit opportunities from consulting, the type of work that they were doing. And it really sort of turned on a light bulb above my head, where I realized there's an even broader set of levers and a wider set of tools to be able to do what I wanted to do. And the idea that I could, with my background, have the capability to be the type of person who would go to a company, bring fresh set of eyes to a problem, and work with that really motivating team to solve problems and bring new ways of thinking to a business. There's no way I can think of to have more of that impact, both within a company and without the company, than that. And that really sort of turned my vision towards consulting in a more specific way.
Yeah. So in your application, you didn't mention like what industry you wanted to get into.
That's interesting. So in my Touch MBA submission, I may not have. That's interesting. In the applications that I ended up turning in, I was pretty specific about wanting to do human capital strategy in tech firms.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very specific.
Two main reasons. One was that the tech industry is putting a focus on human capital that is sort of ahead of the curve in some other industries. And secondly, that the future of work is changing because of technological advances. And so to be on the human capital side in a firm that's actually innovating the way that work is going to happen would sort of be on the forefront in both of those ways. So that was very much my focus in that aspect. And as my career goals have evolved, what I've realized is something that's really exciting for me and that consulting offers is the opportunity to be exposed to a variety of industries where you can work in tech, you can work in the consumer packaged goods industry, you can work in healthcare, you can work in private equity, and you can do all of that within the one single job.
Yeah, I feel like, your first semester has really broadened, right, your perspective on what you can do and what you want to do. And then I just want to touch on the Roy H. Park Leadership Fellowship that you happened to win. That's amazing. Tuition free for 2 years. Oh my gosh, that's a dream. That's like the dream for so many applicants. So I know you had to write an extra essay for that, right? On talking about leadership, an example of leadership.
Yep.
I'm curious to hear what you wrote about. And also if you had any kind of tips for other listeners who are interested in Cornell Johnson and would love to get that fellowship. I'd love to get your thoughts there.
Yeah. So first of all, it is sort of a black box surrounding that process. I wish I could give somebody a step-by-step map on how to do it. And if I was to go back and do it again, I'd probably mess it up and do something different. So take any of my experience with a grain of salt. The essay that I was asked to write, and I don't know if this changes from year to year, was about the greatest example of leadership for my career. I chose to write about one of the more trying challenges in leadership in my career, where I had to step into a role that I was unfamiliar with, that was a role that had been held by someone who reported to me, and to work for the summer in a department that I only knew sort of from a very general sense. And I had to suddenly dive into the weeds and find ways to keep the department afloat and also find ways to optimize that department moving forward. And I framed the essay with the idea that I could talk about my greatest accomplishments as a leader, but that's leadership made easy. And what I think demonstrates real leadership in many ways is when you're able to work in suboptimal circumstances and find ways to succeed regardless.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, is there anything else, just looking back? I know it must seem like a century ago, but is there anything, looking back at your application process that you kind of wish you had known or paid more attention to, or something that you felt was integral to your success, not just getting into Cornell? Yeah. Finding a good school.
So one thing that we haven't talked about that I think was really important for me, one thing that I think was really important was making the time to talk to current students at each of the programs. I did that with at least one or two students at each of the schools that I applied to. And then in many cases, those students would connect me with another student, say what you said reminds me of my classmate, you should talk to them. And I probably spoke to more students at Cornell than any other school because of that, because they would connect me with their classmates with whom they thought I had a similar thought process, but also because every time I talked to a current student at Cornell, there was just this feeling that it was an old friend that I had spoken to before and that we were now reconnecting, even though it was a stranger who was, doing me the favor of taking an informational phone call. And that process, someone else might have spoken to those same people and not gotten that vibe, and maybe they're flourishing at another school. I knew that Cornell was a place that I was going to fit in. And the L.E.A.D event further solidified that. And all of the conversations that I've had since have made me just very happy and confident that I've made the right choice in being here. And I think anyone who's applying to MBA programs is well served to speak to as many people as possible. Because even if you ask the most generic questions, so what do you like about your school? What don't you like? What do you want to do? What are the classes like? What professors do you like? The way that they answer those questions will tell you if that's the type of person that you want to be surrounded by. Each program has its unique traits, but at the end of the day, the core classes are pretty much the same wherever you're going to be. What's going to define your experience is your network, are the people that you're spending time with. And if you can align yourself with the school that has the people that you do feel akin to, you're going to be happy.
Yeah. It's amazing advice. So let's move on to your first semester. So you mentioned what we're really looking for is being close to classmates, feeling that bond. But what is it like to endure this super intense first semester with all your core or most of your core courses packed in there? And I mean, everyone talks about it, right? First semester is full of FOMO. It's like you got to meet everybody. You got to participate in all these clubs. You're starting recruiting. You're getting through academics. You're just trying to have a good time period. You're like not working anymore.
Yeah.
How, what has been your journey through that the first couple months?
Yeah, it's, I was talking to a classmate of mine last week and we were both sort of shaking our heads saying, I really thought they were exaggerating. I thought we'd be fine. I thought, I've been busy before. It's like no other experience. It is just like they say, it's drinking out of a fire hose. There are days when you don't stop moving from 9 a.m. to midnight and you feel like you'll never get caught up. And then you get caught up. And at the end of the day, I think there's some really just useful skills that you have to get. And that's sort of why they design the program like they do. You need to be organized. You need to manage your time and your calendar. You need to learn when to say no, and you need to know what to de-emphasize when. There's not time to do everything, and you do want to do everything. And so what you get really good at is understanding what your non-negotiables are, figuring out how to communicate those, and then how to work with your teams. At Cornell, we're grouped into small core teams that we work on projects with throughout the semester. And there's 282 of us in the class, and we're broken down into 50, maybe 59 core teams, something like that, of 5 people each. And that core team is designed to maximize the diversity within each individual core team. There's an algorithm that apparently runs for 24 hours straight in order to maximize every type of diversity you could possibly think of. And the thought process behind that is it's more difficult to work in diverse teams, but you get better output with diverse teams because there's a broader set of insight and input, and you have to make an effort to communicate. And there's a sort of impossibility of making assumptions. That it's much easier to make assumptions when you're with people that are just like you. And when you're with other folks, you need to communicate and talk through things. And so when you're in the midst of the core and everyone's trying to figure out how to prioritize and how to get everything done, you really rely on your core team. And you find the opportunities when, hey, I'm not that busy this month because my recruiting season hasn't fully started in earnest. You take a backseat on this project, I'll step up. And then 3 weeks later, it's a different story, and that person steps up, and you really learn how to work in a productive team that mirrors, in my experience, in the real world and what I expect to be the case working in teams again after school.
Yeah. And has all your quant prep helped you or with those core courses?
Yes.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yes.
Okay.
So one thing that Cornell does is they have it's affectionately referred to as Math Camp. I think it's
That's funny.
it has a more official name, but there's a several day course that's actually taught by Peter Regan, who does the MBAmath.com course. So he comes on campus, and it's like 3 or 4 days, and he runs through each of the courses that are on MBAmath.com, and really sets you up for success, so that you're not going into your first day of microecon without having looked at a formula since, in my case, high school. So that definitely helped. And in my case, I was really fortunate to have had some time in between finishing work and starting school, and to be able to use that time preparing myself academically, because on one hand, I didn't want to drown, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to keep up with the coursework. But I also didn't want my coursework to be difficult to the point that it was going to detract from the rest of my activities at school, from recruiting and from club activities, and from, being able to be a social part of the class. And I probably over prepared in some ways, and did more than I probably needed to in retrospect. But I would have done it again 10 times out of 10, because really more for that latter reason, that it allowed me to succeed academically without it taking over my life. My other piece of advice would be, if you're coming to Cornell, they'll give you a specific set of pre-work to do to prepare you for accounting and for microeconomics. Do the pre-work. It will serve you very well, and it will allow you to, like I said, succeed without being overwhelmed as you're getting hit with everything from recruiting to clubs to extracurricular activities.
Well, yeah, let's talk about those two things, recruiting and clubs.
Yeah.
So
Great.
Let's start with clubs. You're the consulting club president.
Correct. So that's
why
that's
and how did you become president of this club?
Right. So we've been very fortunate as a class to have the second years that we've had. The consulting club at Cornell is an incredible resource, and the exiting consulting club president has made it her mission, and it's actually part of an official project that she's working on at the school to make the consulting club as strong as it can be. And it was strong already, and she's worked to really codify and sort of next level some of the processes in consulting club. And to be able to step into her shoes and continue the work that she was doing would be a great honor, I think, for any of us. From my point of view, there were a couple classmates who approached me and asked if I was running, and asked if I was interested in that, and indicated that they'd be willing to vote for me. There's an election process that happens to get this position, and I become somewhat of a public. It's a small program, and people tend to know each other. There's about, like I said, 280 of us, so you do get to know everyone in the class. But because I'd been on stage a few times, and I'd had the opportunity to present, people for the most part knew who I was. And so my sort of campaign, or my platform, was basically that what you get with me. I will work as hard as I can, that I'll take it seriously, and you don't have to wonder about sort of what my motivations are. I'm here for the group and for the team. Knowing me, if I'm who you want as the president, if you'd like to vote for me, I would be happy to and honored to take on the role. So that was sort of my thought process there. And I've got a great board working with me, and I'm really excited to see over the next year what we're able to accomplish.
I mean, that must be quite you must feel great that, you had no consulting experience coming into the MBA, and Cornell Johnson is known as a consulting school. It's known to have, a good curriculum and send a decent portion of grads into consulting, and your classmates in the first semester are saying, "Hey, you should think about being president." I mean, how were you able to build those sort of relationships so quickly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Johnson makes it really easy to build those relationships because, I mentioned core teams. There's also cohorts that are a newer initiative at school that'll enable the first years, the second years, and the 1-year MBAs to work together. There are, I've got my network in the Park Fellowship. I've got some of the other clubs I'm involved with the podcast. There's case competitions where you get and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. And then there's other case competitions where you get to work with other people. And so I mentioned before the importance of prioritizing and finding the opportunities to say no, but at the same time, it's important to be involved to the extent that you have the bandwidth for,
right? And
to sort of always find opportunities to sort of be of service to others, because that will come back tenfold. And that's not only advice for business school. I think that's advice in general.
For sure.
And so, I do my best to be a good, helpful person who, in the group can be relied upon, and, to the extent that it's, helped me to be a better person and benefit. Hopefully I've been able to help some other folks as well.
It's awesome, man. And so, can you just talk briefly about what the consulting club does and how that ties into recruiting, if at all?
Absolutely. So it is a professional club geared towards, in my case, first years who are intending to intern in consulting roles. It works from the beginning in helping you to tell your story and understand what the firms are looking for and what firms might be right for the type of work and the type of consulting that you'd like to do. And over the course of the semester, it gives you advice on how to handle different interview questions and how to best tell your story in the interview, and then eventually how to operate in the case interviews, which is a sort of strange technical process if you're not familiar with it, and is really designed to help you share with the interviewer how you think and how you are able to go about solving a problem. And it's a really great curriculum that is completely student run with some help from the Career Management Center and from the faculty. But it's very much built on the idea of the second years who went through the process a year before and had internships over the summer, passing along their knowledge and the knowledge of the years from before to the first years, and having that real recent experience be able to be transferred in a very sort of structured way. And then the consulting club sort of works hand in hand with smaller career work groups. They call them CWGs, where there's about 5 first years with 2 second years, and they meet just about weekly to give a little more personalized recruiting advice. And those CWGs are for all first years who are recruiting for all sorts of careers. And your CWG is specifically tailored towards a group who are recruiting for, in my case, consulting, but it could be tech, it could be entrepreneurship, it could be, there's investment banking, of course, and then marketing and some other career paths as well.
Wow, that's great. That sounds like, it sounds the career working group. You said 5 first years and 2 second years?
Correct.
That's a great ratio. So you kind of declare, all right, this is where I want to go into, and then the school puts you into those groups?
Yeah, there's a survey that goes out early in the term where you indicate what career you're thinking about. And of course, everyone has the opportunity to pursue whatever they'd like and to sort of change their mind. But you sort of have to decide probably by the beginning of, by mid-September, I'd say what career path you're going to recruit for, at least for your first summer internship. And then based on those preferences at that point, you're assigned to a work group. And that's the team with which you meet throughout the semester. I've had a really great experience with my career work group. We took our CWG leaders out to dinner last week, and they've been a great help to us. And it really speaks to the environment at Johnson, where people are collaborative and really want to help each other out.
And so, let's talk about that recruiting.
Sure.
What's the view on the ground? Like, when does it get started? What is it like? Have the consulting companies started recruiting? What's going on?
Yeah. So it starts hard and heavy and fast. I can speak most directly to consulting and to general management recruiting, but each industry, of course, has its own timeline. the folks who are recruiting for human resources roles, that recruiting starts immediately. Most of those folks already have offers. Investment banking recruiting is its own very structured, rigorous process that Johnson does extremely well, and they start working immediately, and they work incredibly hard, and it's really impressive to see what those folks are able to do. From the consulting side,
when you say right away, are we talking about the first month, first week?
Yeah, first month. There's the consulting club. The version of that for investment banking is the old Ezra, named after Ezra Cornell. And so each of these professional career groups is having meetings weekly, essentially from the beginning of term, and then the intensity of the recruiting basically depends on the schedule of the firms that recruit within those areas. With consulting and investment banking, there are very sort of specific, rigid structures and processes and timelines by which it goes through. There are other industries where that's the case, but I'd say consulting and investment banking have the most structured recruiting processes in my experience. And from a consulting perspective, what it looks like is there's briefings where companies will come on campus and everyone will come into a lecture hall, and the firm will talk about what their company has to offer, what it's like to work there. They'll have alumni from Johnson who are able to talk about their experience, and any second years who interned with that firm will also attend. And then we'll have receptions afterwards where we'll get to network and get a little more one-on-one connections. And then some firms will also have, they call them coffee chats or office hours, where you get to meet one-on-one or two-on-one or three-on-one with practitioners from those firms to really get deeper insight into what makes each firm unique. And very much like the MBA admissions process. I was
going to say, sounds exactly the same.
It really is. At the end of the day, it's sort of like a double click on that process. Yeah. So the more seriously you take your MBA recruiting, I think the more success you'll be able to have in internship recruiting. And so at this point, application deadlines, some have passed, some are coming up in the next couple of weeks, and interview invites are starting to go out. Interviews will happen largely in January. Second rounds will happen, depending on the firm, within a week or two of the first rounds. And then offers should start rolling out end of January, early February.
And are you also trying to get a leap ahead of the process in the same way you took MBA Math and Coursera courses? Sounds like you're participating in a lot of case competitions. I think I saw that you're doing some student consulting was it CR consulting? Is that right?
Yeah, BR, Big Red Consult.
My bad.
So I can talk about both of those. So case competitions are a really fun, unique part of the MBA experience. And I remember while I was applying to schools, hearing people talk about case competitions and thinking, I don't know about all that. I haven't been to business school. How am I going to know what to do in a case competition? And the culmination of preterm, which is a 2-week period before the second years start school, where it's all about getting the first years acclimated to the MBA schedule and the programming and getting us in class and working in teams with each other. That culminates in a case competition where it's the first time that you're working with your core team, and you have 5 hours to solve that problem and present a case on it for the whole school. And I was very fortunate to be on the team that presented a unique idea. And we were selected by the faculty to be in, I think, the top 8 of the submissions. And then the students voted out of those top 8 on a top 3. And so we went up to defend our idea, and we won that case competition. And then further on down the line, there's through Johnson it's the SC Johnson marketing case competition. That's a graded process for your marketing class. And once again, my team put together a really strong idea, and I think we presented it well. We made it to the finals and won again. Yeah. So we were sort of back to back. And then on a different team, it was a case competition that's actually run through a consulting firm. We were able to present an idea to help a company sort of achieve profitability, a real life example. And again, we made the finals. We're able to present, made the top 3, and we'll actually go to represent Johnson at the national case competition in January in a couple of weeks. So there's definitely opportunities to build your team working and your problem solving skills. And that's not restricted to just MBA students. There's folks who participate in hospitality hackathons and case competitions for the entertainment and media industry. It's a really good opportunity to work with people in your class that you might not otherwise collaborate with. And then separate from that, there's Big Red Consulting. So one really great thing at Johnson is how much of the curriculum and the experience is geared towards experiential learning and really being able to apply very quickly the things that you're learning. So I'm involved with Big Red Consulting, which is a consulting group that is run with Cornell students. Not all of them are through Johnson. There are some PhD and some engineering, I believe, and some law students who are involved. And we're grouped into small groups, just like the consulting firm would. And we have a client, and we're helping them to analyze the design of their organization and find a way to really optimize their internal structure for growth. And it's a real client. We're really working with them and doing analysis and finding ways to help them solve their problems. And there's another dozen or so teams who have their own clients and are working on that. And it's a great opportunity to be a consultant while you're a student at Johnson. And outside of consulting, there's also Big Red Ventures. There is the Cayuga Fund. There is Big Red Micro Ventures, which helps smaller organizations. There is Big Red Tech Strategy, which is, and all of these are real project-based in the real world, leveraging the capabilities of Johnson students to help make Ithaca, the entire region, a stronger place.
Yeah. And do you guys get paid for that?
No, it's we're paid in experience.
There you go. I just had a check. I had a check, but yep. I mean, it's a win-win for both sides. I understand.
It's a really great experience, great process.
So, have you gone through any consulting interviews yet?
So those will all start in January. Right now, there's a lot of mock interviews happening and a lot of networking calls with people in firms, but the actual interviews won't happen until next month.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because I was just curious, how those firms are going to view your background, because they probably don't see many people with your background applying. So maybe.
Yeah, one thing that we're told a lot is, I obviously feel like I have a non-traditional background. And one thing that we've heard a lot from practitioners, from faculty, from people in the career office is everyone thinks they have a non-traditional background. If you're going into consulting and you have a non-traditional background, that means you weren't a consultant. And there are some people who were consultants before school, but many people in the consulting club were not. And what the firms are really looking for, to my understanding, are people who are going to be good consultants moving forward. And it's much more about the capabilities that you have and your ability to be a strong member of their team, much more than it is about what you've already done in the past.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so looking forward, you just finished your final exams, kind of relax a little, take a deep breath, or maybe not. But looking forward to your next semester and year two, I'm just curious, where your mind is at. Like, obviously, it sounds like you're going to be very focused on your consulting interviews. Mm-hmm. And is there anything else you're kind of, like you said, what are your non-negotiables for semester 2 and year 2?
Yeah, that's really well put. So one thing I just love to emphasize is how much fun we really have at Johnson. It's a really fantastic group of people, and that's sort of demonstrated by some of the sort of elective extracurriculars that some of us have taken up on. I started sort of an informal group called Mindfulness for the Type A Personality that's designed to help MBAs who maybe are aware of meditation but haven't practiced it, a peer setting with which to explore mindfulness and meditation and sort of be centered in the midst of all this craziness. And so,
wait, are there any Type B classmates at Cornell?
If they are, they don't come out much. No, no. There's all kinds and all types and various levels of sort of intensity and motivation. Yeah. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek way to advertise the sort of the ability for mindfulness. There's also a group of us who very early started a casual running club, and it's a little bit cold for outdoor running right now, but there are some of us who are continuing, and we signed up for a trail race in April. It's called the Seneca 7. It's a 77-mile trail race run with 7 teammates, so everybody runs about 11 miles altogether, and that'll be fun. I'm also involved with the Johnson Book Club, and I'm looking forward to continuing to read and discuss books with those folks. And then we were talking actually before we started recording about treks. I'll be on a trek to Colombia at the end of spring break in March. And there's another group going to Israel and another group going to Pakistan. And I really just want to make sure that I get as much out of this MBA experience as I can, because after this, it's back to work and working hard and hitting the ground running. And I just want to be able to look back and know that I ate the core and was able to really appreciate in the moment the incredible experience while we've been here.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's talk about it a little more, the social side of things, because I think it is such a huge piece of the puzzle. And I mean, one part of it is you're not working and you have this time. I mean, you're not quote unquote working, right? You're working a ton, but you have this time to explore different sides of yourself, to meet people from all over the world, to have fun, to go on these treks, whatever. But I can also see it being like, if you have a utilitarian mindset about it, you want to help your classmates, but also like, this is the time to really build relationships too, right? And I would imagine not all of that is done in class.
Yeah, that's very well put. There's plenty of non-official club activities that get people together. It feels like every weekend someone's having some kind of house party or apartment party, or trips to a vineyard, or there were a bunch of us that went out and did a 10K trail run about 6 weeks ago. It's an extremely social experience. It's very rare that there isn't the opportunity to do something at night. And then again, for those of us who are more on the introverted end of the spectrum, if you just need to take a Tuesday night and stay in my case, hang out with the dogs, that's perfectly fine. That FOMO that you mentioned earlier in the recording is certainly omnipresent, but everyone can sort of chart out their own journey. There's no shortage of opportunities to hang out and build your network. And one of the really great things is the opportunity to find your group of people who share your sort of energy level, and groups pop up all the time. There's a cinema group that one of my classmates started to watch new and classic movies. There's dinner groups where people will cook dinner for each other. It's an incredibly social, friendly experience, and something that I'm almost sort of taking for granted by this point, but was really noticeable at the beginning of term is everyone's a good person. It's very rare you get 282 people together and all of them want what's best for the group. And that's honestly been my experience. And it makes it really easy to take risks. It makes it really easy to be your true and your best self. And it's just an incredible opportunity to grow and develop as a person with other people who are doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're not in high demand because of your bartender background? Or have you chosen not to really announce that to the group so you don't get
Oh no, I'm an open book. Everyone knows my background. It's actually funny. I have not demonstrated my bartending abilities, but some of our professors have. There's a charity event that happens in the fall where professors will bartend at the local haunt, and all the gratuities go to a charity that helps kids.
Nice. I want to ask you about being on the older, more experienced spectrum. I mean,
yes.
Is that true, by the way? I just want to make sure that's true.
So, yeah, I think the average age, the mean is somewhere around 28 years old. So I'm a couple years old. I'm 31 now. I'm a little older than many of my classmates. It's not something that I'm really aware of on a day-to-day basis. I think it's something that I'm grateful for in that, as you sort of referenced earlier, I'm able to bring a broad array of experience, both from acting and managing and excuse me, being part of various organizations that some of my less experienced classmates don't have. And so that's something that I'm able to sort of bring to the table. I will say for me, this is the right time for me to be getting my MBA. I think about where I was earlier in my career, and I'm looking at my ability to get the most out of my MBA. And this is the right time for me with zero reservations. And there's a few other folks who are around my age in the program. I'm not the oldest person in my class. And I think that's generally the sentiment, is that we're, with our perspective and experience, able to sort of contextualize what we're learning in a way that is able to sit with us in a really tangible way. And that's not to say that my younger classmates are by any means doing it too early. I'm saying for me on my journey, this is right. And I'm incredibly impressed and inspired by all of my classmates from the age of 22 up to those who are older than me, by the vigor and intelligence and insight that they bring into every discussion. And it's a really incredible experience overall.
Yeah. And are you getting a chance to meet any of the Cornell Tech cohort or the Cornell 1-year cohort, and maybe
Absolutely.
other graduate students as well? It sounds like that one consulting group, you're meeting some people, right, from different graduate schools. But yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really great is that Cornell is a premier research institution, and some of the best thought leadership and research across the country is done right here. And so there's a number of really structured ways for us to make contact with people in the rest of the university, and a lot of it just happens socially by nature of being in close proximity. The cohorts that I mentioned are a means by which to combine the second years, first years, and the 1-year MBAs or AMBAs into one place. There's a period at the beginning of term where the students who are getting the tech-specific MBA at the Cornell Tech campus are on campus in Ithaca doing some of their core courses before returning to Roosevelt Island. And during the second year, there's opportunity to take classes on Roosevelt Island at that tech campus. So you get all the New York City you could need. There's also, and I don't have the exact name of it, but for those students who are pursuing entrepreneurship, there is a structure in place to connect aspiring entrepreneurs with researchers across the university to combine some of the MBA side of entrepreneurship with some of the research and innovation being done across the campus, in order to combine those ideas and really have the potential to start something great. And then on the social side, there's MBA vet school mixers that happen. There's
MBA
opportunity
vet
to get,
school? What is that? Oh, veterans.
Yeah, Cornell has a great veterinarian.
Veterinarians.
Has a great
Okay.
veterinary school. And then there's trivia that happens on campus for grad students at they call it the Big Red Barn. And there's plenty of opportunity to really be part of the greater Cornell community.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it just sounds like this cornucopia of options and things to do and people to meet and classes to take and companies to meet.
I think that's really well said.
I mean, do you have, I don't know, if any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience? You were once part of our audience, so you unfortunately listened to probably a lot of these. Heard my voice.
Not unfortunately. It was I think an essential part of the process. So I'm grateful that the show existed for me, and I'm hopefully someone gets something useful out of this. I will, if I can, take the opportunity to plug the Present Value podcast, if I may.
Plug it.
The Present Value podcast I'm involved with. It's an independent editorial project produced and hosted by students at Johnson. And the idea is to really bring the ideas and insights from thought leaders to people who are interested across the world. We have faculty, we have alumni, we have industry leaders, all able to talk about some of the research and learnings that they've done. And it's one of my favorite extracurriculars that I've been involved with. Right now, I'm a producer. I'll start hosting episodes next semester. I should have mentioned that as one of the things I'm most looking forward to.
Awesome.
We've got, I won't spoil the guest list, but if anyone would like to subscribe, they won't be disappointed.
I mean, I think you should spoil it. leave people wanting some more.
Let me. Why don't we? I can share some names offline.
Yeah.
That way, if there's any schedule changes, I don't end up saying something that ends up being delayed.
Gotcha. I mean, that's super exciting. I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes so people can just, click there and subscribe. Yeah. Like, are you planning to make any changes to the format, or are you guys going to keep rolling with the similar format that you have now? I listened to a couple episodes, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, great. Happy to have your listen. So the podcast was started a few years ago by Cornell students, and I believe we're on our third season right now. And it's really sort of a startup energy where we're trying to create episodes, generate content, market the show, find our listener base. And I think next year, as those of us who are first years now start taking over as second years, there will certainly be an opportunity to sort of dive deeper and perhaps experiment with some different formats. But we're very honored to sort of be stepping in the shoes of those who created the show, and we're excited to see what happens.
Can I give one suggestion?
Please.
I think that you should take a microphone to one of the social events and showcase that side of the school. Because listen, no, it's great because, the episodes I listened to were from professors and one of your deans. And so it's like getting a preview of the types of people you're going to be learning from. And it's nice because it's condensed into a shorter session so you can kind of get the good stuff. But I personally would be interested in seeing student life and maybe even an academic part of student life, but that'd be really interesting.
You could do a This American Life, This Cornell Life style episode centering on different stories in the community. That's a thought.
There you go. So but anyways, I'm super excited for that, and let us know when you launch that or when you start hosting, and I'll be sure to give you a shout out. But Gregory, thanks so much for coming on the show and really displaying that spirit of service and reaching out and saying and remembering that we had agreed to do this. And I'm just so glad to have this chance to talk to you, and hopefully we can get you on again, maybe towards the end of your second year.
Yeah, Darren, this has been great. Like I said, I'm very grateful for the show and happy to pay it forward. And I'd love to come back, and sort of do a retrospective. That'd be fun.
Let's do that. All right, Gregory, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.